On this episode, we're looking at Stuart Gordon's creepy fairy tale Dolls, starring Stephen Lee, Ian Patrick Williams, Carrie Lorraine, and Guy Rolfe. And a whole lot of scary as hell dolls. For those of us old enough and cool enough to remember cruising through actual video stores, we'll get a fuzzy, nostalgic feeling remembering all of the amazing posters and VHS covers found therein. Naturally, a lot of us made crucial movie night choices based on those covers alone, but a great deal of them were so alluring that we probably ended up renting the majority of the options on hand over the course of a few years. Some of those images are plastered in our minds forever. One in particular is the cover of Dolls. Who can forget that nightmarish artwork? The doll holding out its two eyeballs. Simple, yet thoroughly effective. Turns out, that was how Dolls began, and we'll get to that in a minute, but it proves that sometimes all it takes is one visual to set the creative ball rolling. Or eyeball, if you prefer. That visual really sets the tone for Dolls, which is equal parts creepy and quaint. Striking such a balance is no easy task, and yet director Stuart Gordon, working off Ed Naha's screenplay, really makes this a bewitching fairy tale, although R-rated fairy tale to be sure. It's definitely a different experience to watch Dolls as an adult. You appreciate its absurd sense of humor more, but when I saw it as a preteen kid, it chilled me to the bone. When the stage has been crucially set and the third act kicks off with some really freaky doll-on-human violence, it's a hell of a thing to watch when you're about 9 or 10. Chucky never really scared me, to be honest, but these dolls were terrifying. Most of it comes from the way they move, specifically when they're being manipulated by stop-motion genius Dave Allen. They're given a surreal quality the way you'd see them move in a dream, not to mention the way they scowl and sneer. It's really hard to shake. So what's it all about? Stranded in the middle of nowhere during a fierce storm, a family of 3, mean-spirited Father David, evil stepmother Rosemary, and lovable tot Judy find refuge in a seemingly quaint cottage owned by a seemingly nice old couple. Joining them in the sanctuary are amiable tourists Ralph and obnoxious punks Isabel and Enid. And over the course of the night, 6 newcomers discover that seemingly nice old couple's vast collection of antique dolls don't appreciate disruptive strangers. Treat them nice, they'll leave you be. Treat them poorly, well, you can't imagine how big of a punch these little buggers pack. We have legendary B-movie producer Charles Band to thank for planting the seed for Dolls. One day, he called screenwriter Ed Naha, who had written Troll for Band, into his office and simply showed him a picture that he wanted made into a movie, Roger Corman style. The poster said, "The Doll," and essentially depicted a similarly horrific scenario the infamous poster for Dolls would later display. That of a doll-like figure holding out an eyeball. Band said the movie was to be about a killer doll, and Naha took on the assignment after ensuring he could add more than one doll to the mix. They don't make them like that anymore. Stuart Gordon had a 3-picture deal with Band Empire Pictures and was preparing to make his follow-up to Reanimator, another Lovecraft-inspired shocker called From Beyond. Band had the idea, in another Corman-esque move, for Gordon to shoot Dolls and From Beyond back-to-back on the same soundstage in Rome. Gordon moved his family out to Italy and began the long, arduous task of making both films, which would prove as difficult as it sounds. Though Dolls was shot before From Beyond, it was released a year later because it took so long to finish the doll effects, most of them courtesy of Dave Allen, who had worked on such films as The Howling, Twilight Zone, The Movie, and The Hunger. Although Band wanted a movie that was gory on the level of Reanimator, the end result of Dolls was a film of a somewhat more gentle and fantastical spirit. Still, it more than earns its R rating thanks to a bevy of bloody death sequences and those really nasty dolls. The tone of the film is really where it's most successful. It's not really a movie for kids, but you can't quite call it a hardcore horror film either. It lives somewhere in between, a twisted fantasy for the young at heart. That's the whole thrust of the film, and that's what makes it so unique, especially in Gordon's filmography, since of course he's mostly known for his Lovecraft adaptations and his more ambitious future efforts like Robot Jox and Fortress. This film is more on the gothic side of the spectrum, complete with an old dark house which contains seemingly endless hallways and its eerie owners. There's a lot of care to make this abode as haunted looking as possible, a place you would most certainly not want to venture around by yourself, especially at night. Even before the dolls start to make their presence known, there's an atmosphere of disquiet about the place. And yet, this is a fun movie too, filled with lighthearted touches and impressive comedic timing. The aforementioned hosts provide a good portion of the creepiness prevalent in Dolls, as Guy Rolfe and Hilary Mason present us with two very accommodating hosts. So accommodating that they can only be evil. But are they really evil? The movie has it both ways, making them horrifying and yet gentle. As with most morality tales, it's the people with rotten souls who get their just desserts, albeit in truly ghastly ways, and the innocent who are looked kindly upon. So let's just say these old folks have good intentions. They just have rather sick ways of teaching lessons to those who need them. On a technical level, the film is practically flawless for the genre. The doll effects by Alan and his team are phenomenal. A little dated by today's standards, but that's what makes them so charming. And when we see what happens when you look inside those cheery faces, let's just say you won't look at your grandma's porcelain doll collection the same way again. The cinematography by Mac Ahlberg was just the right amount of spooky, and the lush production design by Giovanni Natalucci is phenomenal, especially considering the fact that just about the entire film, even the exteriors, were shot on a soundstage. All of the performances are spot on, even when they're a little hammy, because chewing the scenery fits in with the picture's overall atmosphere of surreality. Rolfe and Mason are just the right amount of unnerving and cordial, and what's most impressive is how much they do with a simple stare and smile. You really don't know if you should be charmed or frightened. Ian Patrick Williams and Caroline Purdy-Gordon make for perfectly loathsome parents.
Where's my daughter? She's safe.
With friends?
She belongs in a juvenile home, that little punk.
And their final moments are deliciously grotesque. In fact, the final transformation sequence at the end is the most bone-chilling moment in the film, if only because it looks so damn painful. And as an aside, Purdy-Gordon is the real-life wife of Stuart Gordon, and he has absolutely no problem making her a mean old witch who meets a fittingly brutal end. The heart of the movie is in the relationship between Stephen Lee's good-natured traveler Ralph and young Judy, played by Carrie Lorraine. A fast friendship that could initially be seen as, well, a little off-putting is actually surprisingly sweet, as the childlike Ralph is misunderstood by the so-called adults in the room just as much as Judy is, and you genuinely root for the two of them to be rid of the cretins as soon as possible. Yes, Lee goes a bit overboard sometimes, but ultimately it's difficult to picture anyone else in the role. He's that convincing as the big teddy bear of a man. And speaking of teddy bears, there's a pretty sweet one early on that sets the stage for the strange flick, giving us a quick peek into Judy's overactive imagination. I mean, damn, I sure didn't have visions like that as a kid. Another plus, Dolls is a blissful 77 minutes long, which is really just perfect for a movie of this sort. Not too long as to wear out its welcome. Too many movies today, even horror movies, are ridiculously overlong, but old Stuart Gordon knew just how to keep things neat, tidy, and to the point. Besides, if it had been any longer, it might have taken them an additional year to shoot. Dolls is a masterfully constructed horror fable, both lovable and horrific at the same time, and it's arguably the most polished film made by the likes of Gordon, band, and producer Brian Yuzna. These dolls make posers like Annabelle and the new Chucky look like Barbies, and if you're a big kid like me, it'll make you scared of those little bastards all over again. Thank you for watching our show. If you like what you see, please subscribe to our JoBlo Videos channel. Tell your friends who like this sort of content. Turn on the bell to receive notifications for all our latest videos. We are an independent company and we appreciate your support. And if you have any suggestions for future episodes, please leave them in the comments below.